Here's the thing. This is an open letter to Uncle Sam. Here's the thing, Uncle Sam. It's like the problem is that the problem with democracy, the free market kind of money is speech kind of democracy that is being advocated by the leaders, who is Uncle Sam. This free market kind of democracy that is money is considered as speech, and people are, you know, allowed to spend, as much as they want on their friends and colleagues. So the whole point of choosing the right kind of leaders becomes a bit of a sales kind of deal. It's not. It has becoming a transaction, a sale. Because here's the thing: what do we know? What we do know is that the same people who chose Obama once, voted for Obama once, the same people voted for Trump. Most of them. Sort of like, now we like this guy, now we like this guy. Now, the only thing that Trump and Obama had in common, the only thing they had in common was salesmanship. They were both good salesmen. Commerce driven, in this commerce driven democracy that we are advocating for, in this commerce driven democracy, only a salesman, a good salesman can win. You sell yourself, you sell your plan, or usually the lack thereof the plan. Just go in blaming everybody, sort of like, you're to blame, everybody's to blame, sort of. So the lack of plan, blaming everybody is not a plan, but many sell it as a plan. It's like, anything that happened before me, it was all shit. I am the savior. Folks, this idea that I am the savior is what a good salesman does. That's the whole idea. Here, I'm going to sell you this car. I'm going to be the savior of you, because this car is going to get you to make, to work, make some money. This car is going to, I'm the savior of you. I'm going to, fix you in the hospital. The doctor says, I'm the real savior of you. I'm going to fix your heart, and you're going to... They're all salesmen. All of them have to be very good salesmen. Depending on the services they provide, they have to be very good salesmen to succeed in business. And that's the part that when you make this sort of election a business-oriented, you attract a bunch of salesmen. You see what I'm saying? This whole idea of let's have an extravaganza of 3 years of election for a 4-year job. Yeah, can you imagine having a 3-year election period for a 4-year job? So you have to enter a contest 3 years early, and as only a year after the last time, that last election, only a year after, even if you get elected, only a year after you get in, as soon as about a year after you get in, you have to start the new rounds of election posturing. It's all about posturing. The whole thing has become who takes better photographs. It's sort of who stand well in camera, and this, uh, the most intelligent guy in the world might be is probably the ugliest guy in the world. It's sort of like you don't know that. It's intelligence and ability to lead and all of that you may find in a very humble looking humanoid, but when you market charge the election process and you say, yeah, let's have an extravaganza we call elections, you're like, okay, so you don't need a leader, you don't need an intellectual for that job, you need a cheerleader, you need a Hillary Clinton was bad because she had a very chivalry laugh, and she didn't look so comfortable in her skin. Well, intelligent people are not usually comfortable in their skin. Very, very, my dog is very comfortable in his skin. What does that tell you? He sits down and licks his own ass. He's very comfortable in his own skin. And you're thinking to yourself that, no, I don't want somebody who's very comfortable in their skin to have that job. No, I'm not saying that Hillary Clinton necessarily was a good candidate, but Bernie Sanders was a good candidate. And I guess if he was very, photogenic, the message would have translated better. I don't know, but it seems that way. It's sort of like you gotta sell a salesman, and a good salesman, stands out, and that's what Trump was doing when he grabbed hold of these motherfuckers who are shit. I'm not going somewhere in the middle, motherfuckers. I'm coming in the front, taking the photo. Have some of this. I'm not standing behind Estonia. So who does that? That's the salesman. That's the salesman who does that. So this salesman is not the most intellectual. That's not the sharpest tool in the box. This probably is not the most intellectual, guy. Has to be an extrovert. I mean, you look at Obama and Trump, and you see a few characteristics that makes a good salesman. Both always trying to charm people, and both are very extrovert. But the problem with the system, you have a lot of dumb extroverts, then you have intelligent extroverts. Most intelligent people happen to be introverts. They don't like extravaganzas. So they become I don't know, writers for the media. Very intelligent people become writers, and research. They get into academia. They don't like extravaganzas. Oh, they take a pussy here and there, but they're not looking for, because they're intellectuals. Because they are intellectuals. They don't enjoy a lot of extrovert activity. So, but you got a system that you have to elect a guy that is the homecoming king, a homecoming queen or homecoming king. Well, not a lot of intellectuals, if you remember from school, not a lot of intellectuals fit in the category of homecoming king. The intellectual, actually he missed the prom. He was attending a chess tournament. That's the difference. But then the guy who does go to the prom and who's the king of the prom becomes your supposed potential president. You see, he was the king of his prom, and he has something. Let's see what he does. But the point is this, that you are pre-selecting based on qualification that has nothing to do with intelligence. If you allow your politics to, if you allow your commerce to dictate your politics with money, with donations, first of all, the poor people can never put enough money together to, come up with enough to be able to match very determined rich. No, very determined rich basically, put a fascist in charge and say, call it a day. We are not going to part with our wealth. Please have this guy. This guy is gonna put his foot up your ass if you don't listen. So that's what fabulously, very rich guys. They want a guy in charge who can keep order so he can make money. That's the top dog, keep the fucking order. I don't know where you have to, eat, how you have to eat, we don't care. It's like, where is our money? The thing is, again, we go back the whole idea, what the common denominator between Obama and Trump was that they were both good salesmen. One convinced the majority to vote that way, and the other one convinced the majority to vote that way, for whatever the fuck reason. But the common denominator seems to be salesmanship. They were both good, salesmen, good, okay looking on camera, even if, one had to do a bit of a red face to stand out from his white background. I think that the reason Trump painted himself was because, he didn't want to stand out. He didn't want to, blend into the bright background. Sort of like, you see, I have life left. It's red. I have life left. I'm not going to disappear in the background. So here's the thing, Mr. Obama and Mr. Trump, honorable men of sorts, but the point is this. The point is this. These guys, the one thing they have in common is their salesmanship. The ability to sell. They sell themselves, they sell their plans, they sell the whole package, this whole and at the end of this extravaganza of election process of all extroverts enjoying each other's company at very large rallies, so, is basically what it gets down to. It's sort of like you get a frat boy, a very extrovert. You get the beer guy, the guy who belonged to the beer fraternity, not the guy who belonged to the fraternity who were into, chess and contact with higher intelligence. You don't want that guy. You can't get that guy because the whole process is a sales process. That the nerdy kids who are the more intelligent of their class, they don't enjoy, the whole the dog show process, because this is I'm sorry, love you, Uncle Sam, but here's the thing. It has a lot of commonalities. The presidential elections or any kind of elections that happens, the extravaganza, it's like, it's a very, expensive, idol worship, idol. It's like, let's say they have Miss America. Well, they have Miss America, and then presidential campaign is sort of like, well, we have Mr. America too, and it's called presidential campaign, and we have it every 4 years. It's a big one. So you see what I'm saying? Let's see who's the most popular we can find and put in charge. And I'm sorry, putting the most popular one in charge, the most charming one in charge. That doesn't mean intelligence. That doesn't mean the guy has good intentions. Because usually people with good intelligence have the sense to have good intentions too. We got it all wrong. We keep showing in our movies that the guy with intelligence was the bad guy, and the good guy was the guy who, went and eliminated the bad guy, the guy with the intelligence. We have it backwards. Every time, it's advocated that the guys with the intelligence, no, they're always the bad guys. Why? Starting from Dr. Strangelove. The Dr. Strangelove, the guy with the intelligence is like, obviously was a bad guy. It was like, it's like, it's okay to say that the guy with the intelligence is the bad guy usually. Well, he has intelligence. If you put intelligent people, but the problem is, the guy in charge was not intelligent. He was a pom-pom boy. Hitler was the pom-pom boy of the industrial Germany, and the old money Germany. He was the pom-pom boy of the old money Germany, expansionist Germany. And you don't want that. That's why Merkel was so important at her job, because Germany cannot, elect a pom-pom boy. Those areas cannot elect pom-pom boys. We cannot go towards pom-pom boys, because these are the guys that that stand up, say no, enough. Very few, they don't bend over for everybody. You want, people with principles. Salesmen don't come, it's by luck. Usually salesmen are not the most principled individuals. Let's put it this way. Usually salesmen are not the most, the most intellectual or the most, principled, or they're not. They're salesmen. The job is selling yourself. So what is selling oneself? Selling oneself means cover up the bad parts, freshen up the good parts, and make a family album of the good parts. This is my life, this is the good parts. Look at me, look at my life, and elect me, and just cover up the bad parts. And they go as far as the candidates send investigators after the other person to try to find those hiccups, of which apparently, Mr. Clinton had a lot of. But, he was able to sell himself because he was a good salesman. Bill Clinton, he was a very good charming fellow. But the same could be said about, Mr. George W. Bush. Good salesman, great salesman. I mean, you see that George W. Bush in the parking lot, and you're like, yeah, I can trust him. That face, I can trust. That face, and Clinton's face, and Reagan's face, and Obama's face, and Trump's face, barely put together with some extra on top. But you still see those faces, and you say, yeah, trusting. I can trust this fellow. And when you do that, when you say that, then qualification of the job is to be able to sell yourself as a leader, leader of men. Well, the whole thing is like, let's find a frat boy with a clean record, or let's at least find a frat boy who, whose record can be clean. It's not too bad. But it has to be a frat boy. It has to, understand loyalties and be a salesman, and sell the job and understand who's paying for this shit, and recognize who's paying for this shit, so you know who you have to, wag your tail for. So therefore, everything is socialism, just because, everything is socialism just because, big boys don't want to part with wealth. They have got rid of, between Walmart and Amazon, they have got rid of like a large portion of the society who made their living in, exchanging goods for material, exchanging money for material. This retail sector is like all went up in smoke. So so a lot of people were, had these jobs, and they no longer exist. They say there are more, automatic teller machines, as in like dispenser of goods, more robotic, dispenser of goods in Japan than there are people. It's like they have like 3 for every Japanese. It's sort of like these have become they are dispensing life to the Japanese. That they got rid of, retail jobs when even before Amazon. They were getting rid of retail job before Amazon. But now with the delivery and the whole shit, it's like, okay, what the people are going to do? And don't say coding, please. It's sort of like, really, sort of like, people are not that flexible, especially at older ages, to adapt to, okay, you were a truck driver yesterday, now you can be a coder. Here is a screen, start coding. And if he could have been a coder, he would have been a coder, or some similar job near it, around it, within that area. He wouldn't be a truck driver. So the problem is that the salesman that becomes the chief of the tribe may be very photogenic, but may not be very, bright. In case of Obama, the salesman was a bright fellow. In case of George W. Bush, not so bright fellow. Uh, Not so bright meaning looking at, cross-border incursion around in other places in the world as a matter of factly, as in like, yes, that is an option where we can go and take an army over there into that tribe. However, that tribe, whatever kind of fucking shitty order it has kept. Order, good. Disorder, bad. Order, good. Could we agree on order, good, and disorder, bad? If we can agree on that, whatever cocksucker has kept order over there has to be dealt with. Because order, good. Disorder, bad. Disorder, bad. It's colonial mentality to say, you know what, one becomes speechless that whatever the one on the one side of the world have to approve of a different form of government on the other side of the fucking planet. It's sort of like, are you fucking kidding me? If you say democracy over here, this is your solution to governance, do you think the tribes of Amazon, once emerging from their huts and being added to the continuous humanity, would they have any clue about what you mean by democracy? And would they ever, understand the decisions that are made against their interest? You go about as you're selling democracy as a let's have a fashion contest, let's have a personality contest, basically Mr. Congeniality, or Mr. Homecoming King. Every 4 years, let's choose a homecoming king, see who we can find that is both have good ideas but mainly look good on camera, and be wanting to go around and do all the song and dance routine for 3 years. 3 years 3 years taking off for a job. It's a I don't know how to put it, but to say that it's a 3 years of song and dance and going through a routine of being picked for a job. Sort of like this extravaganza is not really is not really. Why are you? This extravaganza is not really necessary, because specifically it's not very necessary because it keeps away very, very bright people. They're not extrovert. They're not attracted, and they never make good salesmen. How many university professors do you know who make good salesmen? They don't. They're usually disagreeable people. But because they have principles. Well, supposedly, but the whole idea of university principal, university educator, is that somebody who have learned bunch of lessons and gathered a bunch of information, and now they're trying to dispose of that information for generation after generation. These people are bright people, principled people, and you have these, but very few of these are electable because they're not extroverts. And you're turning to yourself, it's a specific job then. So the guy has to qualify as an extrovert, and well, basically at the end of it, extrovert and be able to be good salesman, and all of that comes under being able to sell yourself, being a good salesman. Well, most bright people don't qualify as being good salesmen. Like Biden, they may have some kind of speech impediments. Doesn't mean they're not bright. It's just they might have had some speech impediments. That speech impediments, if Biden hadn't gotten rid of that speech impediment, he would have never been able to be electable, ever. It's sort of like this would have been the deal killer. You don't want the public. You don't want, you know, in this kind of election process, a guy with a speech impediment would cost CBS, would cost Fox News a lot of money. They would have to have like a 5-hour newscast for a 2-hour show. But the point is this: it would have cost people money, so he would have been, out of question. Don't want a president with a speech impediment. But then why not? So you have a bright fellow who's, let's assume, the guy's really bright and honorable man. Let's assume the guy would, but he has a speech impediment. So should that speech impediment disqualify that guy from the race? Now imagine if the brightest guy on earth has a speech impediment. Still, you're not going to choose him as your president because, it's the brightest guy. I don't care if he's bright, he can't speak. So get rid of him. We don't want him as representative here. So this extravaganza of election has made it such that you have to pass over a lot of bright people who are usually teaching in your universities. These bright people are usually have a lot of disqualifiers that would not look good in this extravaganza that you call election process. Some have some issues, family issues, some have some these issues, and most important of all, they're all introverts. They're very intelligent, very well read, but they don't want to speak to 50,000 people, 500,000 people, 5 million people, the whole stadium. How many university professors enjoy talking to a stadium full of people? I doubt you can find one. You can. It's just not a normal trait to have, speaking in front of lots and lots and lots of people. But those who have it, it's like, oh, you have the skill of being able to speak in front of lots and lots of people. Here you go, we give the keys to you. He might not be the brightest. He's usually not the brightest fellow. You gotta have some kind of, some kind of chutzpah to feel you're entitled to speak to these so many people because, again, because you're able to speak to these people, you're able to sell yourself to a lot of people. Different people, different messages. But the point is this, that conservative or Republican, conservative or Democrat, conservative or progressive, let's divide it more broadly, conservative or progressive, no matter what, every time I can assure you that most bright people are progressive. More bright people are progressive. And, I'm sorry to say, less bright people become conservative. It is what it is. Because conservatism is basically meaning the paranoia that if we change, we are going to be less of a creature. If we change our perspective in life, if we change the ways we do things, that somehow is going to, have bad effects on the society. This basically conservatism says if we change anything from the way we are doing it right now, or we have done it 2,000 years ago, if we change anything from that, we are going astray, not realizing the conditions of that time. They had slaves. You don't have slaves now. So you don't understand that because one doesn't make any sense, you can basically kiss the book goodbye, put it aside and say, okay, we keep that in the cabin. That's religion, we keep it in the cabin because it just really doesn't make sense anymore. Okay, but we keep it in the cabin as a museum piece. The way Norwegians are keeping their churches as museum pieces. So they do museums. So my point is this. You cannot allow, if you want better, you have to, pull the money out of the system. Make it illegal to have any kind of money, have any kind of effect in the political system. If money does not have any effect in political system, what that means is that then the three-ring circus goes away. When the three-ring circus goes away, a lot of money is pushed out of politics. It's sort of like if nobody's paying for it, Fox cannot fucking run any ads on it. If nobody's paying for this election process, if wallets don't open and people don't spend money. But the problem with progressives as they are right now is that they still have to, use the same the rules that the conservatives have set down. The rules is you have to raise a lot of money to be qualified for the election process. This election business, you have to raise a lot of money for it, and who's got the money? So the progressives who are actually representing the oppressed, have to bring out their hats and collect $5 and $5 and $5, while the conservatives who are representing the guys in charge, conservatives who are actually the representatives of the people in charge, they just, the check is in the mail. They don't have to ask for money. Have you ever seen, one of these really, really older members who have good backing from the rich money in, let's say, some poor state, poor area on this planet, and then you say that, okay, your people are poor and you're representing them, but you don't seem to ever need money. So your people are poor and you represent them, but you don't never ask for money because there are few rich people in that area who are paying for your election. When you say speech is money, money is speech. When you say money is speech, that's the welding that is holding commerce and state together. When you say money is speech, that welded money and commerce together. That weld has to be broken. There was also weld between church and state. The way the fucking there still is in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan. There is this weld between the state and the church, mosque. There is this weld between the state and the mosque. And of course, commerce is... They're way behind, but let them be. They will grow out of it. But the point is this. The weld between... But you cannot put the weld between the church and the state aside. Break that weld. Okay, you did that. Thank you very much. Now you have to break this one, the weld between the state and the commerce. This weld is that idea that money can qualify as speech. Money is okay to be spent on political ads, hit jobs against your opponent. Money can be used. If you have the money to, hire a whole crew of 5,000 people to work on one documentary project, if you can do that, if you have that kind of access to capital to pay for this kind of extravaganza, if you do have that capital just sitting around, the whole thing becomes a commercial endeavor. Democracy becomes a commercial endeavor in which money exchanges hands between, members of the society until, then at the end of it, you have this extravaganza of money changing hands in every election process, at least between legitimate money, and forget about the illegitimate money, just the legitimate money that exchanges between those who want to advertise and those who have to, their business is based on advertisement. Their income is based on advertisement. Those who want to advertise and those whose income is made out of advertisement, and then the dancers and the showgirls and the venues, rented venues and rented parts. They say Trump owed them so much money because of all these parties he threw in their town, overtime for the police and this and that, or even the rent of the venue. He owes them money because, I guess he didn't want to pay them. And why is there a need for that? Why is there a need for that? Why do you need to have this extravaganza? Why do you need to throw so many parties? Election should be a very dry process. When you pull the money out of it, it will be a very dry process. Election should be a very dry process. Okay, here's what Wikipedia page of every the candidates. Okay, here's the Wikipedia page of these candidates. Let's agree what we agree are facts. Let's agree on that and go based on the Wikipedia page and a page attached to the Wikipedia page of the person who's, that should be the election. Attached to that page would be a few pages of thoughts on how to carry out the business of state. That's all. You don't need this 3 years, 4 years, 6 years extravaganza of personalities, very extrovert personalities who are really frat boys, good salesmen, frat boy, very lovable gentlemen, but not very bright. And frat boys have certain tendencies. Bullying tend to be one. Bullying tend to be one of those tendencies. You see what I'm saying? So, do you really want a bully in that job? Do you really want a hard-hitting salesman who, even actually changes his accent from time to time to match the crowd? Do you want that kind of frat boy? A showman? Good showman? Do you want a showman in this result of democracy is a good showmanship? Do you want a good showman? I mean, if the idea is who's a better showman, then I guess one of these comics makes a good president, because it's all about who does a good show and dance routine. Ukrainian president, he's a good showman. He was an actor. Ukraine is going the way of Uncle Sam. Let's put an actor, then let's find a salesman. That Azerbaijani fellow is a real good salesman. Then, he's a real gangster salesman. And then this salesman, I'm sorry, but love you, man, but here's the thing. He goes into the mud and then he comes and rubs himself against my leg. So here's the thing. The idea is that if you want a government to work, you need a bunch of intelligent people to work together. Very intelligent people. Frat boys and the frat boy bully popular guy who had all the girls, they're usually not the brightest tool in the box. They're very manipulative, they're very salesmanish, they had their fun life and they did whatever they wanted to, and hopefully the election time they could cover it up. But they were salesmen with salesman personalities, and all the failures that salesman personalities have. Intelligent personalities, they have less failures. Let's put it this way. They have less failures. As human beings, as productive members of society, intelligent beings have more grasp of things. Intelligence better. Less intelligence, not as much good. Now tell me how George W. Bush was elected. It wasn't based on his intelligence. What was it based on? He was a party boy. He was a party guy. He was a frat boy. He was a bully, and he was, his coke snorting, women banging all day, all night. That kind of dude. Good for him. Who am I to say, but who am I to judge? But the point is this: Do you want that guy as your president? Do you have a system on earth that guy gets to be president? The guy who has that kind of personality? No, not really. Because he's not the sharpest tool in the box. Again, he's the best salesman salesman. He's a very good salesman. So in commerce, he probably does well. Most of these guys, if left alone, all they were bright enough and they were salesmanish enough that they would have done well in commerce, just in sales. All of them. And Trump was the last one who actually sold himself in sales very well. Very well. Well, not well enough to keep the money that, he was left. He lost a lot of the money, and he lost a lot of the cash, and then he was living on credit. He's been living on credit, I guess, for 50 years. He lost the cash, and he's living on credit. That's not a great businessman. But he was able to keep himself in the news. That's a good salesman. If you're able to keep yourself in the news, that's a good salesman. But if you lose all the cash and you end up with living on credit of this bank and that bank and maybe some international banks, who knows? But if you lose the cash and end up living on credit, you're not a very good businessman. You might still make a good salesman, but you're certainly not a good businessman. So, but the salesmanship was good, and he mastered the salesmanship, and he eventually got the message from the people that they're not very happy, because the last salesman, Mr. Bush and Cheney, the last salesman also were able to sell a couple of wars, very profitable wars for the very companies that they came from, or their families belonged to, the oil industry and the arms industry. So just because commercial man got into state, became their head of the state, well, the state became very commercialized. Therefore, Mr. Elon Musk says, yeah, you know what, you can't have that. You can't have a salesman in charge, because the salesman is not the brightest tool in the box. And not being the brightest tool in the box means 9 out of 10 times you don't have the best answer to the question. Not being the brightest guy in the toolbox means 9 out of 10 times you do not have the right answer. But then you're given the key to execute, the main button to press to execute, and you're not the brightest tool in the box. If you say that but these people bring a lot of intelligent people around them. Really? A bunch of salesmen are going to be able to, just by bringing some intelligent people around them, the salesman would be able to pick the right answer? Imagine yourself, if you may, you got like 5 chemists bringing very important final medical ingredient to the table, and you're going to ask Mr. Gigolo to make the last decision on which of these to pick, which of these complicated answers to pick. Mr. Gigolo. So Mr. Reagan, the actor, You think he had enough, cognitive power to make the right decisions? Why? Isn't cognitive power the power to be able to come up with a bunch of options? You know, come up with a bunch of options. That's the bright guy. A bright guy who can come up with a bunch of options instead of opting for, you know what, we're gonna, get rid of these people. We're gonna put some soldiers on the ground over there, and we're going to bomb the shit out of that place until they submit. Don't look at it. Don't look at it as country. Look at it as population. You're taking these boys, men, these honorable men who decided to serve their tribe in the military capacity. You're taking these folks in Timbuktu and telling them to kill people. Not bad guys. I'm sorry. Kill bad guys. Timbuktu. The guy from Harlem just fell in love with this job of going and kicking ass. So the poor guy ends up in Timbuktu kicking some ass, and you're wondering to yourself, it's like, would a university professor send this guy into Timbuktu to kick some ass? Would a university professor send this gentleman out to that shithole to kick some shit ass over there? Would a university professor do that? No. Why? The reason is simple. The university professor would say, what gives me the authority to dictate the form of government that would, benefit the fuckers over there? That form of fucking government they're still, fucking their goats. So let them fuck their goats in the African form of way and leave them the fuck alone. Exploiting the land, how much suffering is it worth? How much suffering is worth exploitation of the land? Should we eliminate the whole 110 million Redskins because we want to, tame the land? These Redskins haven't been able to invent strong enough arms to, they haven't been able to invent strong enough arm to repel us, Europeans. So we come over, we take over, we have much more repellent guns because we are much more aggressive, I might add. When you say we at this point, I'm talking about the Anglo-Saxons, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese. The British are, they're Vikings. It's just, they're right on top. Always when it comes to who's ready to invade somebody, the British are involved. Well, the British were the planners. They're not only they're involved, they're the planners. This was their wars that I think Uncle Sam has carried out. But the point is this, but who carries out wars? The bully, the frat boy. But would a university professor in charge carry out those wars? No, of course not. There are much simpler ways to, disarm Iraq. Just show good faith, send them tourists. Show good faith, open trades with them. What's the problem? Is it all the oil that you want? I mean, if you show good faith, I mean, they will also eat and you will eat. And but it's not about good faith. It's about, I guess you can say one reason for Saddam having to go was, he was too, too nationalistic for his own good. And, he was interested in what was going on in Western Asia, in European colonies, in Western Asia. Saddam was a guy from that region of the world who was worried about the Western colonization, Western colonies, the European colonies in West Asia. And he raised some alarms about it. He wasn't happy. He, attacked them on a few occasions. So, if anybody in that region who's not happy with the European colonies in West Asia, right next to the Suez Canal, anybody who's not happy with that, we have a problem with. Who's we? The other, Europeans from across the pond, from the Europe and across the pond. These guys are very happy with the European colony in West Asia. They have a foothold in West Asia. The British look at Israel, the NATO looks at Israel as a foothold of Europeans in Asia, West Asia. And they have to fight daily on it, and there is they're after fucking how many years now, 70 years, there's still daily gunfires. They're the locals still protesting the presence of the Europeans. So it's an idea, a colonialist idea. And apparently managers of Uncle Sam have forgotten that they themselves broke away from being a colony. But if you break away from being a colony, becoming a colonizer, it's a bit of a 180-degree turn. And Uncle Sam has a clear heart. It's just that when you mix commerce with the state, Uncle Sam, it's like mixing business with pleasure. It's like mixing, business with law. You don't want to mix business with law. You don't want to mix business with state. Have you noticed that even judiciary is very uptight about that, about how much effect does money has in the Supreme Court? So they pick these judges and hope and watch them carefully that their bank accounts doesn't swell up suddenly. So these guys who go in there are watched carefully. So if suddenly their bank accounts swell up, they become very suspicious. The system becomes suspicious and looks it up and say, why is this money has this undue? Is probably having some undue effect on this judge. So maybe we should look into that. So that just as much as that is frowned upon, it should be that this contact between politicians and money, politicians and commerce, politicians not money, politicians and commerce, which is the election process, this should be curtailed. This should be literally at election time, you receive 2 packages each containing like 10 pages, one from each candidate. Hey, this says this is who he is. Printed out Wikipedia page. This is who this person is, and this is who this person is, and this person is. Printed out Wikipedia page of their life, and hopefully the election process is not 3 years to think that, oh, he may die within the 3 year. Election is like a week. Everybody has enough time in a week to read 5 pamphlets. Everybody reads 5 pamphlets during the week. Every night, one pamphlet goes out. People read it. Next day, another for the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy. Everybody reads the pamphlets. And then on the 7th day, they go to election. So it can be a week process, which is in many European countries, which, they're doing democracy a little less commercialized, except the fucking British again. Here's the thing, you know why commerce is bad? Mixing commerce and state is bad, and how many times it has shown itself? The British East India Company. The British East India Company was a company that was intertwined fully with the state. When the state provides soldiers to your commercial business in the Shetland, then that's intertwinement of too much commercial interest and too much state interest. This intertwinement is is the problem. The state shall not provide security to commercial interests. State shall not. Hey, deal with your customers a little better. We don't need security. End of story. Deal better with your customers. You don't need security. Whether you're, Chevron working in Saudi Arabia, or whether you're Exxon working, up Bangladesh. Give the local shitheads a better deal. You may have to take home less of a profit, but give the shitheads in the field a good deal. Give the natives a good deal, so they won't attack you. So they will cooperate with you. So you don't need state protection. We don't need to put up a fort in Chad, or in Timbuktu, or the state should not have to put up. When the state starts putting up forts in distant lands on behalf of the interest of commerce, that's colonialism. When the state starts participating in the act of, in commerce. If Chevron makes a deal with the Arabs, let them make a good enough deal that the Arabs, have to be held down with the military, with the state military forces. Or anybody else for that matter. If the commercial interest, if sort of like saying how ridiculous it would be to say, if KFC has issues in India, we should send in the Marines. You're like, should we really? KFC, whatever the fuck they're working, whatever local rules applies to them as well. We're not going to involve the military, involve the state military forces on behalf of fucking KFC. But then you look and you say that it's routinely, the state force is routinely applied state force is routinely applied on behalf of certain industries, on behalf of oil industry, on behalf of, arms industry, on behalf of, and you're wondering, on behalf of energy. A lot of it has to do on behalf of energy. Hopefully, if we can get enough energy from the sun, we don't have to fight over energy underground. But until that day, it seems like this aggressiveness has been, over energy and over the profits that can be made through energy. And if it wasn't for that, it was over diamonds, it was over gold, it was over more access to more women to reproduce more. We are fucking cannibalistic monkeys that we are. It's just at least the least we can do is have leaders who are less of a cannibalistic monkey like the rest of us. We need to have leaders who are not salesmen but very intellectual. And that's the problem with the election process, is that an intellectual like Obama, ends up winning the same race that a not so intellectual Trump wins. Again, back to where we started. What does that tell you? They were both good salesmen. One was intellectual as well, one wasn't. One was just a salesman. Bush, Reagan, Clinton, they were all good salesmen, very good salesmen. Al Gore was not a good salesman. It was too stiff. Hillary Clinton, she was never a good salesman. Who the fuck thought Hillary Clinton makes a good salesman? She's too stiff. So all you need to, the formula is find the best salesman you can. And the handicap of the progressives is that you find very few salesmen between intellectuals. You find very few salesmen between intellectuals. Obama was one. Yes, he was an intellectual. And he was a good salesman, but he's a one in a million. That's why he's biracial. Having the intellect and being a good salesman, usually black people make very good salesmen. They try to be charming and try to, be talkative and involving, whatever makes a good salesman. So, whatever makes the sale. Most of the time you just get a salesman. Sometimes you get an intellectual as a salesman, but always if you're shooting for a salesman, you get a salesman. So this allowing the involvement of money in politics, which furthers, which increases the chances of selecting a salesman. I mean, if you say in a society it's illegal for one dime to change hand during an election process for any activity related to election, not even one dime should change hand. When you put that down, not a dime should be spent during the election process, for the election process. When you write that down and make that to a law, then you save any country, any supposedly democratic country. Put it into a law. No money shall be involved in the election process. money dries up, when the money dries up, corporations, rich people cannot, have their puppets speak for them. So a lot of these rich people probably are going to want to represent themselves. If you tell them nobody else can give you money, the guy will probably say, yes, I have my own money, no problem. No, I don't need to keep any commercial. But then you have to draw the circle too and say, nope, nobody from commerce can run, period. Not only nobody from can change hand, nobody from commerce can run for any kind of governing elections. Only from academia. You must have 30 years, 20 years of academia education. You must have 20 years of academia being in academic fields. 20 years, 30 years. Pick an arbitrary number. 25 years in education, in the business of, in the work of education. Only those people qualify to lead. And then there is no money in the election. 5 days before the election, one night, all the pamphlets are sent out through the mail. People receive it, read it. If they care for it, they read it. If they can't read, I guess they pick one and they vote. But at that point, I'm sure, if you make it this special, in the sense that one night all the papers are sent out and you can take your pick and make your choices, and with that and only a few interviews or non-paying, non-advertised interviews and town halls, non-advertised, only run in C-SPAN with no commercials, nothing. Nobody should make a dime out of this, correct? It's an election process. It's an election process. Nobody should spend a dime. Very dry business of here this guy says this, and here's this guy says that, and here's this guy says the other. Very few interviews, many town halls, but with very few people, because intellectual people don't like to speak to 50,000 people at once. Handful of people in a meeting sort of way. But the point is this: if you're choosing, if you're shooting for intelligence and intellect, your process needs to change. Right now, your process is shooting for the salesman. The process needs to change, take the money out, so you can actually shoot for the intellectual guy, because he actually has a plan that it's not based on talking about the size of his penis. Need to take commerce out of elections. It just shows back to the top point, that the fact that with the same electorate, Obama and Trump were both elected, they have nothing in common except that they're both good salesmen. Nothing. You don't want salesmen. Sometimes you get the intellectual, but sometimes you just get a salesman with no idea how to run the fucking thing. With no idea that things can get serious.